बच्चों, कैसे हैं आप सभी। आई होप आप सभी बहुत अच्छे से होंगे। क्लास की शुरुआत करते हैं। चैप्टर है हमारा अंडरस्टैंडिंग एंड कन्फ्रंटिंग मार्जिनलाइजेशन। स्नेक पीक मार्जिनलाइजेशन। व्हाट इज मार्जिनलाइजेशन? Scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, minorities, other backward classes, inequality, poverty, and then constitutional provisions for marginalized groups, reservations, education, employment, business, confronting marginalization, constitutional provisions, Article 15, Article 16, Article 17, Article 18, Article 19, Article 46, Article 338 and 338 A, Article 275, Article 244 राइट अगेंस्ट एक्सप्लॉयटेशन, जिसके अंडर आता है फॉर ओबीसी, फॉर माइनॉरिटीज, फॉर ओबीसी आर्टिकल 342, बैकवर्ड फर्स्ट बैकवर्ड क्लासेस कमीशन 1953, सेकेंड बैकवर्ड क्लासेस कमीशन 1979, फॉर माइनॉरिटीज स्पेशल प्रोविजंस, रिलीजियस फ्रीडम, लिंग्विस्टिक फ्रीडम, कल्चरल फ्रीडम। फिर आता है स्पेसिफिक लॉज, अनटचेबिलिटी Act 1955, Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989, Provision of Manual Scavengers and Constructions of Dry Latrines Act। फिर आता है बच्चों Prelude, highlights of the chapter. What is marginalization? The four main marginalized groups in India, the problems and concerns of the marginalized groups, the constitutional provisions to protect the interest of the marginalized groups, the implementation of the constitutional provisions by the government for the marginalized groups, the laws protecting the rights for SCs and STs, the constitutional provisions for safeguarding the interest of the OBCs, the constitutional provisions for protecting the interest of minorities. Marginalization. The feeling of being considered unimportant or isolated is known as marginalization. In our society, there are groups of people or communities who have not been able to join the mainstream of society. They live on margins of society and thus feel excluded. बच्चों, वो फीलिंग जिसमें आपको अनइम्पॉर्टेंट आइसोलेटेड फील कराया जाए उसे मार्जिनलाइजेशन कहा जाता है। हमारी सोसाइटी में कुछ ऐसे तबके के लोग भी हैं जिन्हें मेन स्ट्रीम जो सोसाइटी है उनमें अभी तक दाखिल नहीं किया गया है, उन्हें अभी तक उसमें इन्वॉल्व नहीं कराया गया है। ये वो लोग हैं जो मार्जिन सोसाइटी में रहते हैं और अपने आप को एक्सक्लूडेड फील करते हैं कि ये हमसे भिन्न है, मेन स्ट्रीम के सोसाइटी के जो लोग हैं उनसे भिन्न है। The marginalization can be caused because of the different languages people speak, their customs, religions, poverty, castes, etc. ये सभी reasons भी हो सकते हैं marginalization के, जिसमें अलग अलग लोगों के अलग अलग languages हो, religious belief अलग हो, customs अलग हो, poverty हो, caste system हो. Sometimes this marginalization result in communities not having access to resources and opportunities and their inability to assert their rights. They feel powerless and disadvantages in comparison to others who are more powerful as they own land or other means which gives them power. Thus, economic, social, cultural and political factors work together to make certain groups feel marginalized. In India, marginalized groups have been placed in four main categories, which are the scheduled caste, SCs, the scheduled tribes, STs, other backward classes, OBCs and minorities. Scheduled castes. The term scheduled caste can be defined as a caste which was formerly treated as untouchable in the orthodox Hindu society. One of the harmful features of the Indian society was a division of people into castes on the basis of their respective occupations. A group of people who did not belong to caste hierarchy lived outside the village. They were considered outcast and untouchables because of the nature of the work they did. They carried night soil and carcasses of dead animals outside the villages. Scheduled tribes. The tribals who are socially and economically marginalized people, mostly residing in forest and hilly areas, are known as scheduled tribes. The Gonds of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh, the Bhils of Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, and the Santhals of Jharkhand, Odisha and West Bengal are among the largest tribal groups in our country. The tribes that inhabit the Andaman Island are known as the Great Andamanese, the Jarwa, the Onge and the Sentinelese. These tribes are thought to have travelled to the Andaman Island from Africa almost 60,000 years ago. A number of traits have customarily been used for establishing tribal identity. These include a language, social organization, religious affiliation, economic pattern, geographical location and self-identification. There are over 500 tribal communities in India. It is this isolation and the fact they that they follow a culture very distinct from others which sets them apart from the rest. Minorities and marginalization. The term minority refers to a small part of a group. It is less than half or 50% of the total population in the area. As a minority group is numerical small in relation to the rest of the population, they are likely to be dominated and oppressed by the majority. Therefore, their interests have to be protected. Small size of a group can be disadvantaged and led to its marginalization. Therefore, our constitution provides for the protection of the minority community against the possibility of being culturally dominated by the majority. The constitution stresses the need to preserve, protect and promote the religion, culture, language and script of all minorities. Other backward classes. The other backward classes or OBCs may be broadly defined as a group which suffer from lack of adequate opportunity for development, especially in economic sphere and in matters of health, housing and education. The OBCs are characterized by low levels of income, low literacy rate and low standard of life demonstrated by poor living conditions. The government appointed the second Backward Classes Commission in 1979. This commission listed 3743 backward classes or castes which account for about 52% of India's total population. As far as identification of such classes is concerned, it is subject to the judicial inquiry by the state. The OBCs have also been identified on the basis of caste, their specific social and economic conditions and education standards have been taken as the determining factors in accordance to their status. Research junction. What do you think there is low literacy rate among आदिवासीज? आपको ऐसा क्यों लगता है कि आदिवासीज के बीच में जो है लिटरेसी रेट कम है? इस बात से आप क्या सोचते हैं, क्या समझते हैं? बस इसकी प्रैक्टिस खुद से कीजिएगा. नॉलेज जंक्शन. Meera Kumar was the first scheduled caste and the first women speaker of Lok Sabha, the lower house of parliament. She was born in Ara district, Bihar, to the former deputy prime minister and prominent Dalit leader Jagjeevan Ram and a freedom fighter Indrani Devi. She was educated unopposed as the first woman speaker of Lok Sabha and served from 2009 to 2014. She is five-time member of parliament and was the United Progressive Alliance nominee for the President of India in the 2017 election. Grasp and gain. The tribes of India and the world continue to be a valued source of study for the historians about the early humans. This is because many of the tribes have not changed their lifestyles in any significant manner and they live much like the hunters and gatherers. Inequality and poverty. Social inequalities often result in economic inequalities such as the gap between the rich and the poor. In a society, those who have low social status are looked down upon. They do not have adequate resources to receive education and improve their lot. So they are often poorly educated and find it hard to get good jobs and to improve their economic position. In our country, countries of oppression due to a hereditary caste system has led to the backwardness of the lower caste people. Wealth is concentrated in a few hands, mainly the upper castes. Majority of the people who are poor, both in the urban and the rural areas, belong to the lower castes and are mainly landless laborers and perform menial jobs. The tribal people who live in forests are often displaced from their original habitat due to the various development projects of the government. This adversely affects their economic conditions. Although the government gives them some compensation, most of it is usually spent in repaying their debts, due to which they are often left homeless and poor. This is how this section of society has remained poor and backward. Marginalization is closely linked to various factors such as not having access to education, power, sharing and other resources of the nation. It requires serious concerns and initiative from the government to bring them into mainstream of society. If marginalization is allowed to persist, we will never be able to protect the diversity that make our country unique and will not be able to realize our national goal of equality and justice for all. Constitutional provisions for marginalized groups. Many provisions have been included in the constitution to improve the social and economic conditions of the marginalized groups. These have been briefly mentioned below. The social practice of untouchability has been declared a criminal offense. Tribes titles or words such as Nawab, Lord, Sir have been abolished. No citizens of India will be prevented from using the various public facilities such as shops, hotels, tanks, roads, wells, etc. on the ground of his or her caste identity. People can reside without any restrictions in any part of the country except for those areas where tribal groups live. Under the policy of affirmative action, reservations of the SCs, STs and OBCs have been created in government-aided institutions and in various jobs at central, state and local levels. The National Commissions for the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes have been constituted to protect the interest of the marginalized groups. Affirmative action through reservations. The term affirmative action is used for any policy formulated by the government to benefit an underrepresented group and promote equal opportunity for its members in the areas of employment, education and business. The term affirmative action was first used in the United States in an executive order signed by then President John F. Kennedy on March 6, 1961. In India, reservation in education and job opportunities are a form of affirmative action which aim to improve the condition of backward and underrepresented communities defined primarily by their caste. In keeping with this policy, a certain percentage of total available vacancies in government-aided education institutions and government jobs have been set aside for people from backward communities such as the SCs, STs and OBCs. Many citizens who belong to the upper classes find the reservation policy of the government based. They oppose it because they feel that it takes away their rights to equality. However, in view of many others, it might take many more years to bridge the gap between the marginalized groups and privileged groups of society unless we follow a policy of protective discrimination. Research junction. Do you think reservation in government jobs really helps SC and STs to improve their social and economic conditions? What else can be done so that they no more remain the marginalized groups? बच्चों, क्या आपको लगता है कि गवर्नमेंट द्वारा जो रिजर्वेशंस दिए गए हैं जॉब्स में SC और STs को, वो उनके सोशल और इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस को इम्प्रूव कर रहे हैं? आपके हिसाब से और कौन कौन से कदम हैं जो उठाया जा सकता है SC और STs के हित में ताकि ये मार्जिनलाइज्ड ग्रुप में ना रहे? Knowledge junction. Indian Railways have started installing bio-toilets to eliminate manual scavenging. Bio-toilet disintegrates and decomposes human etc. into water and biogas. The decomposition is carried out by bacteria in the biodigestion tank. Bio-toilets are environment friendly. Grass panicking. There are instances of so-called honor killing in our country where a woman is killed by her family members or relatives just because she married or eloped with a man who belonged to a lower caste. Do you think is it human? What needs to be done to avoid such incidents? बच्चों, जो सो कॉल्ड ओनर किलिंग होता है हमारी कंट्री में, एक वुमेन को सिर्फ इसलिए मार दिया जाता है उसके रिलेटिव्स या फैमिली मेंबर के द्वारा क्योंकि उसने अपने से छोटी कास्ट के इंसान से शादी की है, छोटी कास्ट के मैन से शादी की है. क्या आपको लगता है कि ये ह्यूमैनिटी है? और ऐसे इंसिडेंट्स को रोकने के लिए और क्या क्या कदम उठाए जा सकते हैं? बच्चों, इसके बारे में सोचिए आप. कन्फ्रंटिंग marginalization. The Constitution of India upholds the ideal of social equality and rejects the division of society based on a hereditary caste system. The Constitution of India aims at providing justice, social, economic and political to the citizens of India. Keeping in mind these national goals, the makers of the Constitution have included a number of provisions to guarantee better status to the marginalized section of the Indian society. Constitutional provisions for the marginalized groups. The preamble of our Constitution mentions social justice as one of its ideals. Social justice is achieved when all kinds of inequalities in the society are abolished to attain the goal of social justice. The Indian Constitution has laid down certain principles which are defined in the list of fundamental rights. Article 15 of the Constitution states that no citizen of India shall be discriminated against on the basis of religion, caste, race, sex, place of birth, etc. Thus, no discrimination can take place against them in making use of public facilities. Article 16 of the Constitution states that equal opportunities shall be given to all in public jobs without any discrimination. Article 17 of the Constitution abolishes the practice of untouchability in any form and also makes it a punishable offence. Article 18 of the Constitution abolishes the use of titles. For example, the term Nawab attached to a name indicates the royal status of the person. People are now entitled to use only academic and military titles. Article 19 on the right to freedom guarantees 6 kinds of basic civil freedom to all people living in India, one of which is the freedom to carry out any business, trade or occupation of one's own choice. It means that the people of the scheduled caste cannot be forced perform lowly work. The right against exploitation protects citizens from being forced to do any work against their will or to work without pay. Article 46 of the Constitution states that the educational and economic interest of the weaker section of the people, and in particular of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, will be protected from social injustices and all forms of exploitation. Article 338 and Article 338A mention that there shall be a national commission for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, which would ensure that the constitutional provisions of safeguarding the interest of the weaker section are fulfilled. Article 275 makes provisions for the centre to provide financial grants to the states to enable them to undertake special programs for the welfare of the scheduled tribes. So, special provisions have been laid down in Article 244 and the 5th and 6th schedules for the administration of areas inhabited by the scheduled tribes. Implementation of the constitutional provisions. In order to implement the constitutional provisions meant for the marginalized section of the society, both the central as well as the state government make special laws and policies. Some of them are given below. Some seats are reserved for the SCs and STs in the education institutions. Some jobs under the government are reserved for the SCs 15% and STs 7.5%. Coaching at subsidized rates and training for various competitive exams to improve the representation of SCs and STs in the various services, scholarship and passage grants for higher education abroad, launching vocational training in tribal areas and opening educational institutions for the promotion of female literacy in these areas. Specific laws and protecting the rights of SCs and STs. In addition, the policy, our country also has specific laws that guard against the discrimination and exploitation of marginalized communities. These laws are as follows. Untouchability Offences Act 1955. Recognizing the need to uplift the depressed classes, special facilities and reservations have been provided for the SCs and the STs to make this more effective. A law called the Untouchability Offences Act 1955 was passed. This act made the practice of untouchability illegal and punishable from 1976. This act came to be known as the Protection of Civil Rights Act. To give speedy justice to the victims of untouchability, special mobile court has been set up in some areas. Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. Despite the abolition of untouchability by Article 17 of the Constitution, SCs continued to face ill treatment and humiliation till date 1970s and 1980s. A number of SC groups came forward and asserted their rights. They refused to perform their so-called low caste duties. In response to this, people from more power castes unleashed violence against them. Thus, the government was forced by circumstances to enact new laws to stop the atrocity committed by the upper caste people or more powerful groups of the society on the lower caste or less powerful people. Thus, come into existence the act known as the Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. This act prescribes stringent punishment for those who are found guilty for humiliating people from the depressed classes. Employment of manual scavengers and construction of dry latrines Prohibition Act 1993. The practices of carrying human etc. in baskets on their heads by the sweepers is called manual scavenging. A person who does the job of carrying this filth is known as manual scavenger. This job is mainly done by the SC, Dalit women and young girls. Such a practice continued for centuries in various urban and rural areas of our country. The practice of manual scavengers was considered shameful by various reformers and human rights activists who condemned it in most severe terms. These reformers and activists regarded this practice as a negation of human dignity and rights of Dalits. The act punishes the employment of scavengers and the construction of dry latrines with imprisonment for up to 1 year or a fine of rupees 2,000. The act also mentions the prosecution of the offenders under the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. Despite the enactment of this act, the employment of the manual scavengers continued throughout the country. On 23rd October 1996, the National Human Rights Commission issued a letter to various atrocities on the issue of elimination of manual scavengers. In 2003, the Safai Karamchari Andolan, 13 other organizations and individuals, including 7 scavengers, filed a PIL in Supreme Court. The petitioner complained that manual scavenging still existed and it continued in government undertaking like railways. The petitioners sought enforcement of their fundamental rights. The court observed that the number of manual scavengers in India had increased since 1993 law. It directly every department, ministry of the union government and the state government to verify the facts within 6 months. As a result, a new act called the Provision of Employment as Manual Scavengers and their Rehabilitation Act came into force on 6th December 2013. Constitutional provisions for safeguarding the interest of the OBCs. Under Article 341 of the Indian Constitution, it is obligatory for the government to promote the welfare of the other backward classes. As per Article 342 of the Indian Constitution, the first Backward Classes Commission was set up by a presidential order in 29th January 1953 under the chairmanship of Kaka Kalekar. The commission submitted its report on 30th March 1955. The second Backward Classes Commission was made official by the President on 1st January 1979. The commission was known as the Mandal Commission since it was chaired by B.P. Mandal as per the recommendations of the Mandal Commission. The policy of 27% reservation for the backward castes or classes in government-aided institutions and jobs was adopted. In order to achieve the full implementation of 27% reservation to the OBCs, the government has provided the following relaxations or benefits to them. The OBCs candidates have been provided the benefit of relaxed standards in respect of written examinations and interviews. In other words, they get relaxation in qualifying marks in the written examination and interview, as in the case of the SC and SC candidates. The government has relaxed the upper age limit for OBC candidates in direct recruitment by 3 years. The number of attempts for the OBCs candidates who are otherwise eligible have been increased to 7 in respect of the civil service examination. Protection to minorities. India is a land of religious, linguistic and cultural diversity. This diversity sometimes creates problems for smooth functioning of our democracy, as democracy is based on the rule of majority. Many minority group might fight for fear that the majority would make laws and take away their rights. Our constitution therefore includes some special provisions to protect the rights of the minorities. According to the provisions, all minorities, religious, linguistic or cultural, enjoy all the rights are enjoyed by the majority community. In addition to this, the Indian Constitution took extra precautions to help minority communities get an equal status as the rest of the society by providing special provisions. These provisions aim to promote their religion, cultural, language and script. Terms to learn: marginalization, exclusion from mainstream society, scheduled castes, SCs, historically disadvantaged groups in India, scheduled tribes, STs, indigenous communities often marginalized, other backward classes, OBCs, socio-economically disadvantaged groups, minorities, groups smaller than half of the population, affirmative action, policies to improve underrepresented group status, untouchability, illegal discrimination against certain castes, manual scavenging, dehumanizing task of removing human waste. Constitutional provisions, legal measures to protect marginalized groups, social inequality, disparities in social status and resources, economic inequality, wealth and income disparities among groups, Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989, Law Against Caste-Based Violence, Reservation Policy, Quotas in Education or Jobs for Disadvantaged Groups, Protection of Civil Rights Act, अपडेटेड अनटचेबिलिटी ऑफेंसेस लॉ। बच्चों अब आ जाते हैं लेट्स रिकैपिटुलेट पर। मार्जिनलाइजेशन रेफर्स टू द एक्सक्लूशन एंड आइसोलेशन ऑफ ग्रुप्स फ्रॉम मेन स्ट्रीम सोशल participation due to various factors. Scheduled castes, SCs, are groups historically deemed untouchable and subjected to severe social discrimination in India. Scheduled tribes, STs, including the Gonds and Bhils, predominantly inhabit remote areas and face economic and social marginalization. Other backward classes, OBCs, suffer from economic and educational disadvantages, representing a significant portion of India's population. Minorities, defined by their smaller numbers, often face domination and cultural suppression by the majority population. The Constitution of India includes provisions to protect these marginalized groups, promoting social justice and equality. Affirmative action policies such as reservation in education and employment aim to improve opportunities for these communities. The abolition of untouchability and titles that signify social hierarchy is mandated to prevent discrimination based on caste. The Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989 enforces strict penalties for caste-based abuse and violence. The Protection of Civil Rights Act reinforces the illegality of untouchability practices, enhancing legal accountability. Special laws like the Employment of Manual Scavengers and Construction of Dry Latrines Prohibition Act 1993 target inhuman practices. Overall, these measures seek to integrate marginalized communities into mainstream society, ensuring fairness and social parity. बच्चों अब आ जाते हैं असेसमेंट जंक्शन पर. टेक द करेक्ट ऑप्शन. व्हाट इज द प्राइमरी पर्पस ऑफ अफर्मेटिव एक्शन पॉलिसीज इन इंडिया? ऑप्शन ए, ऑप्शन बी, ऑप्शन सी, ऑप्शन डी. बच्चों आगे की प्रैक्टिस खुद से कीजिएगा. स्टेट वेदर द गिवन सेंटेंसेस आर ट्रू और फॉल्स. वन ऑफ द हार्मफुल फीचर्स ऑफ द इंडियन सोसाइटी वाज अ डिवीजन ऑफ पीपल इनटू कास्ट ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ देयर रिस्पेक्टिव ऑक्यूपेशंस. ट्रू. आगे की प्रैक्टिस खुद से कीजिए. बच्चों अब आ जाते हैं फिल इन द ब्लैंक्स पर. बच्चों यहाँ पर कुछ ब्लैंक्स दिए गए हैं, इनकी प्रैक्टिस आप खुद से कीजिएगा. डिफ्रेंशिएट बिटवीन द फॉलोइंग. बच्चों आपको इनके बीच में डिफ्रेंशिएट करना है, इसकी प्रैक्टिस खुद से कीजिएगा. आंसर द फॉलोइंग क्वेश्चंस इन 20 to 30 वर्ड्स. बच्चों इन क्वेश्चंस के आंसर आपको 20 to 30 वर्ड्स में देने हैं, इनकी प्रैक्टिस खुद से कीजिएगा. आंसर द फॉलोइंग क्वेश्चंस इन 50 to 60 वर्ड्स. इन क्वेश्चंस के आंसर आपको 50 to 60 वर्ड्स में देने हैं, इसकी प्रैक्टिस खुद से कीजिएगा. आंसर द फॉलोइंग क्वेश्चंस इन डिटेल. बच्चों यहाँ जो क्वेश्चंस दिए गए हैं उनके आंसर्स को आपको डिटेल में देना है, इसकी प्रैक्टिस खुद से कीजिएगा. पॉइंट टू पॉन्डर. बच्चों इसको आप ध्यानपूर्वक पढ़िए, इसे समझिए और इसके बाद में इसकी प्रैक्टिस आप खुद से कीजिएगा. बच्चों उम्मीद है क्लास में पढ़ाई गई हर एक बात आपको अच्छे से समझ में आ गई होगी. अब आप इसकी प्रैक्टिस खुद से करते रहिएगा.